Welcome back to the Now Morning Show. It's 15 minutes past the hour of 7 o'clock, and our next conversation is focusing on the International Day for the Conservation of Mangroves. Joining us this morning in studio is Dr. Rahanna Juman. Dr. Juman is the Deputy Director of Research at the Institute of Marine Affairs and a Wetlands Ecologist. Good morning, Dr. Juman, and welcome.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you with us on the show this morning. Let's get one thing out of the way first. It may seem like a silly question to some, but there's no such thing as a silly question. What is a mangrove?
Okay, so a mangrove is a tree. It's a type of tree that exists in the what we call the intertidal, between the low tide and the high tide on the coast. And these trees have special adaptation for that environment, so they can actually live in salty water. So they have the ability to either excrete salty water or exclude salty water, as well as they can live in flooded areas. So they're submerged most of the times, and they also have the ability to live in an environment that has low oxygen levels. So because they have all these special adaptations, they're able to exist on the coast and outcompete all the other plants there.
So kind of like a superhero of plants.
Superhero of plants for the coast, yes.
Awesome. Why is this International Day important, particularly to Trinidad and Tobago?
So this is a global day that that has been designated by the UN to raise awareness of the importance of our mangrove forests and our mangrove ecosystems. And this is critical for Trinidad and Tobago as well, because we have a lot of mangrove forests. Unfortunately, we have lost quite a bit of them. But what we have remaining provide us with so many ecosystem services. You know, mangroves help protect our coastline against coastal erosion. They help to help us against storm surges and stuff, breaking the impact of the current, the waves and so forth. It helps in terms of being a habitat for a number of species, many of which we eat. Our crab, our conch, our lobster, our oysters, everything comes from the mangrove. They're nurseries for juvenile fish, so they support our fisheries industry, our fisheries sector. And more recently, what we're finding out, right, is that they're also very important, not only in helping us to address the impacts of climate change in terms of adaptation, you know, protecting the coastline, but they also they sequester or they suck up a lot of the carbon dioxide that is a greenhouse gas, and they store it within their biomass and within the sediments. And they do that more than normal terrestrial plants or any other ecosystems. So that there's this whole trust towards blue carbon ecosystem. So mangrove is a blue carbon ecosystem that provides us with that critical ecosystem service in terms of climate mitigation.
So it's one of the most productive I guess, habitats.
It is a very productive habitat because the trees themselves produce leaf litter that goes into the marine environment and acts as food for a lot of the marine organisms. So it's a very productive ecosystem that is, you know, very biodiverse, have a lot of different species and provides so many different types of habitats.
Okay, Doctor. So the theme this year is protecting wetlands for a common future, correct?
Correct.
How does this resonate with work that's being done locally at this point in time?
So as I mentioned before, we have lost a lot of our mangrove systems because of where they're located, right? It's usually along the coast, which is considered, you know, high-priced real estate. And what we have now are very much impacted because, again, it's where they exist. Many times you find mangroves at the end of a river basin. So a lot of the rivers, before they enter the ocean, they pass through your mangrove ecosystem. And of course, with that, they bring pollutants and so forth. And we continue to impact our mangroves. So they're very much you know, damaged, and we have to focus now on removing those impacts and rehabilitated, regenerated ecosystems so that they can continue to provide us with all these services that they provide us with. So that's why it's critical.
Okay. One of the things that you would have mentioned is reducing the impact on the coast, particularly when it comes to, I think you said storms, if I'm not mistaken. Let's talk a little bit about that. How do they contribute to reducing that and also erosion? So
mangroves have these very extensive root system. They call them prop roots, and they're very extensive. And what they do is they help to break the impact or the velocity of the wave as the waves come in and so forth. And also because of these root systems, they help to slow the water that's going out, and they allow sediments to settle, right? So they do provide that kind of protective function for our coastline. And also because they're trees, they act as a windbreak.
Okay.
So from heavy winds, from storms and so forth. So break the velocity of the waves coming in, and then because of that, they allow like material to settle.
Can we go back to what you would have mentioned earlier when it comes to the role of mangroves and climate change? And could you break that down for us a little bit further?
Sure. So we talk about climate change adaptation and climate change mitigation. As small island states, we focus a lot on adaptation, which is critical, right? So in terms of how it helps us in terms of with climate change, what we expect is higher sea levels, sea level rise. We expect more storm events, storm surges and so forth, and the mangrove help protect us from those impacts by providing that barrier, that hydrodynamic barrier, right, against those impacts. The other thing is in terms of climate mitigation, and climate mitigation is the removal of these gases, these greenhouse gases that are responsible for climate change, and that's where it comes in as well, because it helps to suck up a lot of this carbon dioxide and store it. So it stores it in its biomass and also in its soil. So a lot of it is removed from the atmosphere. Okay. So that's where it assists in terms of climate mitigation.
So another reason, of course, to pay keen attention and preserve as much as we can. Before we get into what we can do as a community, you also would have mentioned the fisheries industry's relation to the mangrove. Can you give us some more details on that as well?
So mangroves provide habitats for nurseries. So they're habitat for fish, but they're also nursery habitats for babies. So fish go in there and they make their babies and they grow up in there and then they move out into the ocean where they will be later captured. They're the habitat for even shrimp. Right? So it's important for that. And I think people in Trinidad, fishers in Trinidad, recognize the importance of the mangrove for their industry, because we get it all the time where the fishermen will tell us, we need our mangroves so we could sustain our livelihoods. You know, so it's critical in that regard to provide that function, that service.
Now, as you mentioned, critical, of course, we know that, as you would have mentioned earlier, and we definitely could take better care of our mangroves.
Yes.
What can we do as people on the ground to make sure that we preserve as much as possible?
Well, as I mentioned, we can remove the impacts that we have control over, which is pollution. So, you know where your garbage is going, right? Because many times people think when they throw their garbage into a river or a drain, it disappears. Many times it ends up in your mangroves. Just earlier this year, in February, we had a cleanup event at one mangrove system, and the amount of garbage we picked up from there. And then I go back and it's the same thing, because it's coming in with our rivers. So know where your garbage is going. When you go into the mangrove for whatever reason, whether it's for recreation, whether it's for fishing, remove all the stuff you take with you. The other thing too is in terms of destructive fishing methods, you know, don't do things that are destructive to the ecosystem, to other fish. The type of fishing methods you use. Oysters, I give you an example. People that go to harvest oysters, they tend to cut the roots, right? When they cut the roots, they remove the surface from which the baby oyster would settle. You know, so we have to look at how we treat with these ecosystems, what we put in. You know, even know where your wastewater is going, you know, the water that comes out from your kitchen sinks and so forth, you know, because there'll be more nutrients going into your environment. So we just need to be cognizant of our own behavior and what we put in and where it ends up.
So from what you're sharing here, humanity basically were one of the biggest threats to the ecosystem. Are there any other threats regionally that we should pay keen attention to?
Well, what we're noticing as well with climate change and the impacts of climate change, we're seeing some coastal erosion happening. So on the coast, like for Caroni Swamp, which is our biggest mangrove forest, we've lost already about 20 hectares on the coast due to coastal erosion. But as sea level rises and the water goes further in, salt water goes further in, you're seeing the mangroves are actually colonizing, moving landward and colonizing other wetland ecosystem. But of course, if you come and you build a road there or you put a house, there's no way for the mangroves to migrate. So we have a phenomenon we refer to as coastal squeeze, where you're going to actually squeeze it out. So even in terms of like planning and building and so on, you know, you have to make sure you leave a buffer between any built development and your mangrove areas.
Okay, so many points to note there. And again, as we were discussing off air, you know, many times we see this and we do take it for granted. You know, we go and we do our lovely tours, we just throw away things as and when, and we don't think about what the long-term effects could be. Now, let's just say that we don't step back from what we're doing right now and try and do better. What would be the effect on the mangroves?
If we continue to behave the way we are and we don't try to make a conscious effort to conserve, the mangroves will continue to be degraded. And when you degrade the mangroves, or when you lose the wetland, or you have lost in mangrove ecosystem, all the services they provide are going to be lost. So if you have a mangrove ecosystem that is providing you with coastal protection, and for whatever reason you have wetland dieback, mangrove dieback, or you have clearing in the mangrove, and you don't have that layer of protection, you become more vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. It's going to impact in the long run your fisheries, because you're not going to have any more baby fish, because you lose your nursery habitats. Those are just some of the things. And then think about, as I mentioned before, mangroves, they have such a critical role in terms of sucking in that carbon dioxide and storing it. But it stores that once it's not disturbed. When you go in and you disturb, you're going to release all that carbon dioxide back into the atmosphere, which is, of course, going to impact in terms of climate change.
Okay, Dr. B, before we get ready to close our conversation, just have to ask, of course, with your involvement as well when it comes to the coast and your coastal management group particularly, is there any relation or any negative effect from the Sagasum seaweed on mangroves? Have you seen that, anything like that?
Yes, unfortunately, we have noticed that we've gone out to investigate, like in Tobago, in the Petitru Lagoon a couple of years ago, before they had the oil spill last year. We actually noticed mangrove dieback in there, and when we went in to observe, we saw where the Sagasum came into the lagoon. It's in the mangrove, and because it stayed there, there's lack of flushing, right? It stays, it decomposes, and then it uses up a lot of the oxygen and creates a very anoxic condition that stresses out the mangrove. And we've seen that in other areas of Trinidad as well, where we notice mangrove that is sort of, because the Sagasum gets in and it doesn't come back out and remains there and decompose, that is stressing out the mangroves. So, like I said, there's some stress that we have control over. We need to remove those stresses, so that they're more resilient and they can easily bounce back.
Dr. Juman, for those who are interested in getting more information and maybe even getting involved, where can we find you?
So we at the IMA, we have the information center with a library with a lot of information. Just a couple of years ago, we published a book on mangrove forests of Trinidad and Tobago. So all of that information is in our library. We have an active social media and website. You could go on the website, you could go on social media, you could visit the IMA. And, if you have events that you would like us to help you with and so on, you could reach out to us at the IMA.
Wonderful. Well, Dr. Juman, thank you for joining us this morning.
No
it's a
problem.
pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much.
Dr. Juman with us this morning, speaking about the International Day for the Conservation of the Mangrove. Stay tuned. We have more on the Now Morning Show after this break.